Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen. Welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut ReFLEXions. I'm here every Monday, 4:30 p.m, usually to talk about the boxing action of the weekend just gone. On the quieter weekends, like the one we've just had, it could be about pretty much anything. And this morning, I was still not really sure what I was going to talk about today. And then when I was on the train on the way back from dropping my son off at school this morning, I read the Metro, which is not always an inspiration when it comes to boxing reflections, but this time, well, it was. And I'll read it, the paragraph in the tipster column that particularly interested me. So they're talking about Usyk, of course, ahead of this weekend's big fight. And it says, the undefeated Ukrainian is a former cruiserweight champion, and Evander Holyfield, David Haye, and Tony Bellew, to name but a few, have all stepped up successfully from the division. Now, I did what any hardcore boxing fan or observer would do, having read that passage, and I immediately logged onto Twitter and pasted it in, or put the screenshot in, and said, one of these is not like the others. I actually said no offence first, which is unlike me. And that's because Tony Bellew only had 2 fights at heavyweight, of course, both against a significantly ropey version of David Haye. And while he won both fights, no one really considers that heavyweight success for Bellew, certainly not in the same realm as former, well, undisputed in Holyfield's case and unified in Haye's case, cruiserweight champions moving up and winning recognised versions of the world heavyweight title. But it did get me thinking about why those two, particularly, sorry Tony, were successfully able to translate their cruiserweight success into the heavier division, and how that pertains to Usyk and his mission when he moved up, and which culminates one way or the other this weekend. Now, let's start with Holyfield, just for no other reason than it's chronological, and also because he was back in the ring somewhat unwisely just recently. And I think the thing with Holyfield is that he was always very physically strong. So at cruiserweight, anyone who's seen the fights with Dwight Mohamed Quaye and so on, you know, very, very brawny, physically strong, able to hold his own in the clinches. No one really out-muscled him. Always very well conditioned, fit, able to go to 12 rounds or 15 rounds at a good pace. And I think moving up to heavyweight, people still considered he was too small. And bear in mind, that was an era when the heavyweights weren't as big as they are now. But people felt he was too small to really make an impact. He wasn't felt to be a huge puncher at cruiserweight. Good puncher, but not a huge puncher. And moving up to heavyweight, that was reckoned by most people to have dimmed even more so. And I think so it proved. I don't think he was a massive puncher at heavyweight, but he was a big enough puncher to get respect and to dissuade opponents from just piling into him. We saw, of course, he lost 2 out of 3 to Riddick Bowe, who was much bigger and was able to take away one of Holyfield's biggest strengths, which was his strength, his physical power on the inside and so on. He was mauled a bit by Bowe at times. So, but he was able to translate it because he had a high work rate, he had fast hands, physically strong, which helped him adapt to the higher weight class a little bit better, albeit not against the biggest opponents. And a respectable enough puncher, and just a bit more of a kind of rugged, seasoned guy by the time he moved up as well. He knew how to do some of the dark arts, if you like, on the referee's blind side, and to get away with, on occasion, using his head and his elbows, and some things that you're not really supposed to do in the official rules. So he was able to have great success at heavyweight, obviously won and then regained the heavyweight title many, many times, even when he was, by consensus, past his prime, still beating the likes of John Ruiz and so on. And for many, looked unlucky to only draw with man-mountain Nikolai Valuev. Although Valuev isn't really a great example of the modern-day heavyweight behemoth, as he was so kind of stiff and slow. No disrespect to him, I hear he's doing really well post-boxing. So that was why Holyfield was able to move up with great success. David Haye is a different story. Not necessarily thought of as an incredibly physically strong heavyweight, but a one-punch knockout hitter. Very athletic, very fast on his feet and with his hands, but most importantly of all, when moving up to take on the giants of the sport, he was a concussive puncher, as we saw both at cruiserweight against the likes of Enzo Maccarinelli and Jean-Marc Mormec, Alexander Gurov, I remember that one particularly as well. And then when he moved up to heavyweight as well, he was able to dispatch bigger opponents with relative ease. I remember the John Ruiz WBA title defense. Ruiz often thought of by one first round wipeout aside, which was seen as an aberration. Thought of as a durable fighter, and Haye dropped him 2 or 3 times on his way to a stoppage victory. That was probably Haye's best performance actually up at heavyweight. Oh, actually no, maybe Derek Chisora. Although Chisora won a lot of rounds early in that fight, Haye ultimately wiped him out. And again, no one gets rid of Chisora that easily, even now, much later on in his career. And Haye's another one who was on that bill, obviously, recently with Holyfield. And although he looked a bit better than Evander, he is a lot younger and still didn't put his foot to the gas against Joe Fournier, probably because he's his mate. But I don't think we can. I think we can rule out any chance of him fighting Tyson Fury, as he claimed he wanted to post-fight. But getting back to the point, Haye carried that power up with him, and it's what made many people consider him as a live, very live underdog in the fight with Vladimir Klitschko, which of course descended into a bit of an ugly maul. Haye maybe won a couple of rounds, but was clearly beaten, and then talks about his broken toe after the fight, which earned him a plenty of fresh detractors and just reaffirmed the vigour with which his existing ones attacked him. Whether he was right or wrong to reveal that injury is by the by, but there was some validity to it, I think, in that with a puncher, obviously, being able to plant your feet and twist so you rotate your body into the shot is incredibly important. And Haye, whether you buy the toe or not, was unable to do that on the night. A lot of that may have had to do with Klitschko's ring generalship and distance control. I guess we'll never know for sure. But Haye was able to have great success at heavyweight against durable operators, bigger men physically than him, and only fell short when he went up against in his prime. Only fell short when he went up against the very best of his era, which was Klitschko. And Haye was undoubtedly the best cruiserweight of his era before he moved up. So he was able to do it because opponents, even if he didn't land, even if he didn't knock people out, there was still a wariness on his opponent's behalf because they knew what a murderous puncher he was. So they were a bit more wary about coming in, stepping forward, mauling him around, using their greater physicality against him in a way that Tyson Fury most recently did against Deontay Wilder. If you're a heavyweight, long, rangy, long arms, you can wrap your opponent up. If you're heavy, you can lean on them. A lot of people are wary of coming in to do that against Haye because obviously you have to get relatively close to do so. And Haye was fast enough in his prime to get in and out quickly with his feet and to unload those fast hands with real power and intent. So he could hold his own despite being smaller, probably, I'd have to check the weights, but probably smaller than Holyfield, prime for prime as heavyweights. So then we go to Usyk. Now, Usyk doesn't have the physical strength of a Holyfield. He's a different style entirely, lots of lateral movement, good shot selection accuracy, not someone who kind of mauls his rivals about, even at cruiserweight. He doesn't also, by the looks of it, have the one-punch fearsome knockout power of a David Haye, although he is a good puncher at cruiserweight, possibly more so than Holyfield, although it's hard to compare the eras. Holyfield has some very tough, durable opponents that he went up against, whereas Usyk won all his major cruiserweight fights on the road, on way to winning the World Boxing Super Series tournament and unifying the entire division. Good puncher, often taken to points, but is that because he's content to thoroughly outbox and dominate an opponent without getting a knockout? Against Tony Bellew, when he seemed to be not in trouble, not suggesting that by any means, but lost a couple of rounds. Fight was maybe in the balance at halfway, and he stepped it up. And as soon as he stepped it up, he found those punches to really wipe Bellew out. That straight left at the end was certainly the punch of a fearsome hitter. But whether that carries up to heavyweight's another matter. We've seen him obviously against Chaz Witherspoon, where he laboured to victory, not particularly impressively. And then against Derek Chisora, I actually thought he boxed very, very well. But again, didn't seem to hurt Chisora particularly or buzz him at any point. Joshua, we know, can be hit and hurt, but not generally by everyone. We're not at the point with Joshua where we're willing to say he's got no chin. He's been hurt, but by decent punchers. Dillian Whyte hurt him. Obviously, Andy Ruiz stopped him. But these are proven heavyweight hitters. Not massive. Andy Ruiz is not like the biggest puncher in the division. He's nowhere up there with Deontay Wilder, for example. But he is a big man and a heavyweight, and he can punch like one. He's got fast hands as well. Usyk's got the hand speed, Does he have the power to really hurt AJ? I would think so, but we will see on the night. But he doesn't have that Holyfield physicality. He doesn't have the Haye punch power. So to win at heavyweight, Usyk's going to have to hope that he can make virtues of the things that would normally be seen as disadvantages. His smaller size and stature to help him move around the ring, get inside when he needs to, and get back out, more importantly, without getting hurt. His hand speed, of course, his accuracy, and just generally his boxing IQ as well. Because he's not going to win this fight by out-punching Joshua. He's not going to win it by out-muscling him. So he can't really follow the path set by either of his superb cruiserweight predecessors who moved up. He's going to have to do it in a completely different way. Similar, I suppose, and this isn't a slight on Joshua because I'm not comparing the fighters, more the situation, to Roy Jones, who skipped cruiserweight entirely, but moved up from light heavyweight to outbox and bedazzle John Ruiz, who's been mentioned far more times in this vlog than I anticipated. But yeah, he seems to pop up everywhere. But yeah, completely outboxed him to win a version of the heavyweight championship. So Usyk's going to try and do it in the same way. But while Jones didn't find it particularly taxing to stay out of the way of Ruiz for those 12 rounds, it might be a bit more difficult for Usyk to do so against a fit, well-schooled, technically adept, not in Usyk's class in that regard, but technically adept Joshua, who can really punch, and more importantly, who's an excellent finisher, usually, once he has you hurt. So there are concerns there for Usyk. I go along with the people who say he's the best fighter Joshua's ever taken on. I completely agree with that on paper, but sometimes, I hate to use the old cliche, but styles do make fights, and maybe even though most people on paper would say Andy Ruiz Jr. isn't in Usyk's class, maybe he just had the requisite combination of both size and style to trouble Joshua in a way Usyk can't. We shall see. All takes place this Saturday, of course, and I'll do a more in-depth preview on Thursday in FLEXpectations at 4:30 p.m. as usual. And then next week, Monday, I'll be back with reflections, looking back on the fight, same time, Monday. Really appreciate your time. Let me know what you think about how Usyk compares to those two famous cruiserweight champions who moved up and won heavyweight gold in Holyfield and Haye, and I will respond to some of the comments. I'll be back soon, and I really appreciate your time. Cheers.